I'm a drunk's daughter, she confessed. The mountain man said, "You're my wife. That's all that matters." The snow was falling thick in the high country when Clara finally spoke the words she had carried like a curse her whole life. They came out rough, as if the cold itself had scraped her throat raw before letting them go. She stood at the edge of the cabin porch, boots half buried in white, hands clenched inside worn gloves, afraid to look at the man behind her. "I'm a drunk's daughter," she said quietly. "Always have been, always will be." The mountain swallowed her voice, pine trees standing like silent witnesses. For a moment, she expected anger, disgust, or worse, pity. That was what people usually offered once they learned. Pity cut deeper than insults ever could. Elias Stone did none of those things. He set down the axe he'd been sharpening, wiped his hands on his coat, and stepped closer. His presence was solid, like the mountains themselves, broad shoulders, weathered face, eyes that had seen long winters and longer silences. "You're my wife," he said simply. "That's all that matters." Clara turned, stunned. She searched his face for mockery, for doubt, for any sign he hadn't understood her. But Elias's gaze didn't waver. It didn't need to. She hadn't meant to fall in love with a mountain man. She hadn't meant to marry one either. When she first arrived in the valley months earlier, she'd only been running from a town that knew her father better than it knew her name. In that town, every broken bottle was somehow her fault, every late-night shout from a saloon tied itself to her blood. Her father had been charming once, people said. Before the drink took him. Before promises dissolved into slurred apologies. Clara grew up learning how to read footsteps on a porch, how to hide money in floorboards, how to keep her hopes quiet so they wouldn't get disappointed too loudly. When he died, face down in a ditch behind the tavern, the town's sympathy lasted exactly 1 week. After that, she was just the drunk's daughter again. So she packed what little she had and followed a trader's wagon into the mountains, not knowing where it would end, only knowing she couldn't stay. That was where she met Elias. He'd found her struggling with a broken wheel, snow already threatening the pass. He hadn't asked many questions. Just fixed the wheel, pointed her toward shelter, and later, offered work in exchange for food and a place by the fire. Life with Elias was quiet. Hard, but honest. Days were filled with chopping wood, tending traps, hauling water. Nights were filled with the crackle of fire and the kind of silence that didn't accuse you of anything. Over time, the quiet healed parts of Clara she didn't even know were wounded. Elias didn't drink, not because of some proud oath, but because he simply didn't care for it. He didn't ask about her past, didn't pry, didn't push. When he finally asked her to marry him, it wasn't dramatic. He just said he didn't want to face another winter without her. Still, the words had haunted her. "I'm a drunk's daughter." She had told herself that Elias deserved the truth, the full weight of it. She was afraid that once he knew, the way he looked at her would change. That he'd see her father's shadow in her smile, hear it in her voice. People always did, eventually. Now, standing in the falling snow, she waited for regret to catch up to his words. Instead, Elias reached out and took her hands, rough palms warm through the gloves. "Your father made his choices," he said. "You made yours." Clara felt something break loose inside her chest. Tears burned her eyes, hot against the cold air. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I grew up in it. I've seen what it does. What if it's in me too? What if one day, then we face it together," he said, cutting her off gently. Just like everything else, he pulled her into his chest, and for the first time, Clara didn't feel like she was being held despite who she was. She felt held because of it, because she had survived. The winter that followed was the harshest in years. Snow piled high against the cabin walls. Storms trapped them inside for days at a time. But Clara found that fear had less room to breathe when life demanded your full attention. She learned the land, learned herself, learned that strength didn't mean never breaking, it meant standing back up without shame. Sometimes, at night, memories crept in. The sound of bottles clinking. Her father singing off-key, promising tomorrow would be different. When those nights came, Elias didn't ask her to be quiet. He just held her tighter. Spring arrived slowly, stubbornly, just like hope. When the snow finally melted, Clara stood outside the cabin, watching the valley wake up green and alive. She realized something then that made her laugh through fresh tears. She wasn't a drunk's daughter anymore. She was a mountain woman. A wife. A survivor. And when Elias came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, she leaned back into him without fear, knowing that some pasts don't define you, they only show how far you've climbed.